Hello, I'm CJ and this is Music Monday. This is our second Music Monday video. And today we're going to talk about two different things. One, we're going to talk about musical notation, as in the different kinds of music notes and music rests we use in music. The second thing we're going to talk about is we're actually going to talk about a particular piece of music. We'll talk about that a little bit later. So for those of you who are just joining us, this is Music Monday. It's a vlog that I do once a week on Mondays. And it's just a little bit of a mini lesson, something to help you maybe grasp a little bit more about music, both in the technical sense and in the appreciation of music. So today we're going to talk about musical notation. And in music, there are many kinds of notes, many types of notes or notation. Today we're going to talk about the very basic types of notes. We're going to start with the whole note. This is a whole note. It's basically just a circle. In musical notation, it's often written musical notation is often written in a calligraphic type of font. And so you get these darker lines and then you get the thinner lines on the top and the bottom. A whole note is kind of the basis of all of musical notation. Last week we talked about how music is mathematical. I'm not even sure if that's a word. We're going to go with it, mathematical. And so all of music is really based on this note or this kind of note. So this is a whole note, and it's called a whole note because it takes up more or less a whole measure. This is, like I said, the basis of all musical notation. And we're going to say for now, for time being, this is worth 4 beats. And that's really important, because everything else depends on cutting this whole note into fractions, into pieces. So this whole note is worth 4 beats. Now, the second type of note that we're going to talk about is what's called a half note. There's the half note. You'll notice it has an open center and a stem, unlike the whole note, which is just a circle. A whole note is worth 2 half notes, which means that 1 half note is worth 2 beats. So 2 of these equals 1 of these. 2 plus 2 is 4. And here we've got math. Yay! All right, so we've got a whole note and we've got a half note. The next note in this parade is a quarter note. And this is a quarter note. You'll notice there's a filled in. This is called the head of the note. Sometimes the note is written like this. Sometimes it's written like this. This is the stem, and the stem is up or down depending on where the note sits on the staff. And so we've got our quarter note, and as indicated by its name, quarter, it is worth 1/4 or 1/4 of a whole note. So there are 4 of these in every one of these, which means, of course, that there are 2 of these in every one of these. Now these are the top 3, or the most basic 3 notes. They're the most commonly used. Quarter notes, half notes, whole notes. 1/4 note is worth 1 beat or 1 count. 1 half note is worth 2 beats or 2 counts. 1 whole note is worth 4 beats or 4 counts. Now, there is one more note that we're going to talk about today. It's usually, I don't see a lot of students using it until they get pretty far into their first year of learning. But the last note that we're going to look at today is what's called an eighth note. And eighth notes are actually written in a couple of different ways. Unlike quarter notes, half notes, and whole notes, eighth notes can be written separately as individual notes, or they can be written together as multiple sets of notes. And there are lots of different lots of different sets of notes. They can be done in 1s, in 2s, in 3s, like this. And this is actually a very special eighth note type. This is called a triplet. We'll talk about that another day. But they can also be written in fours, which means you take two of these, you have one bar across, and there's four notes underneath. And so eighth notes, I'm sure that this will come as a shock since we've been talking about how much. There are 2 eighth notes in every 1 quarter note, which means there are 4 eighth notes in every 1 half note, and there are 8 eighth notes in every 1 whole note. And it's a significant part of learning how to read music, is knowing the values of each type of note. Now, notes are not the only thing that we play in music or that we use in music. We also use rests. And one of the things I think is hardest for students to really understand is that silence in music, the lack of sound in music, can really be a wonderful emphasis on the sound that is created already. So we're going to talk about the different kinds of rests. And these are called rests. They indicate when no music is going to be played, when no sound is going to be played. So when we talk about rests, we're going to talk about rests in the same type of layout that we talked about notes. The first thing we start with is what's called a whole rest. And a whole rest is worth 4 beats or 4 counts. Also, a whole rest is often used to indicate a whole measure of rest. So a whole rest is worth 4 beats. A half rest is worth 2 beats, which means there are 2 of these for every 1 of these. Now, you'll notice that these look very similar. A whole rest is what I tell my students, it's an upside down hat, whereas the half rest is a right side up hat. So hat, half, that's how we determine which one is which. Then there's a quarter rest, which is this really cool looking thing, which I have yet to be able to draw effectively or to write effectively. It's much better when it's in calligraphy. It looks really nice in calligraphy and not so much in my own hand. But this is worth 1 beat. This is a quarter rest, like a quarter note. It's worth 1 beat. And last, but certainly not least, like the 8th note, this is an 8th rest. And an 8th rest is worth half of a beat. There are 2 in every quarter rest. There are 4 in every half rest, and there are 8 in every whole rest. Now, we've talked about all these different kinds of notes, all these different types of notes. The next thing that I want to talk about is what's called a time signature. And the reason the time signature is important is because a time signature will actually determine how much worth each note actually gets. Now, in music, the most common time signature is 4/4. Now, each of these numbers have a meaning. The top number in the time signature tells you how many beats are in each measure. In 4/4 time, each measure has 4 beats in it, which means you need to fill it up with 4 beats worth of notes. You can do that with 1 of these, with 2 of these, with 4 of these, or with 8 of these. 4/4 time is the most common, and that is why it's often expressed with a C, or what's called common time. This is one of the things you'll see in music. It may be indicated as 4/4. It may be indicated with a C as common time. The time signature is always written at the very beginning of the piece. Unless the time signature changes within the piece, it really isn't written again. And as I'm looking at this piece that we're going to go look at in a little bit, I can see that this piece is 4 pages long. It does not change time signature, and so the time signature is only written at the very beginning. And I'll show you what that looks like in a little bit. Now, we talked about the top number. That is the number of beats in each measure. The bottom number is just as important. This bottom number tells you which kind of note gets one beat. And this is where all those things that we said earlier about a whole note meaning getting 4 beats and a quarter note getting 1 beat kind of flies out the window. In 4/4 time, all those things I said earlier are absolutely true. A whole note is worth 4 beats, a half note is worth 2, a quarter note is worth 1, and an eighth note is worth half a beat. However, there are time signatures where that is not true. For example, this is 6/8 time signature. You'll see the top number 6 indicates that there are 6 beats in each measure. The bottom number is an 8, not a 4, which means it's not the quarter note that gets 1 beat. In 4/4 time, the 4 indicates that the quarter note, hence the 4, gets 1 beat. In 6/8 time, it's the eighth note that gets 1 beat, which means that all of the other kinds of notes have to be changed in their value. So in 6/8 time, an eighth note is worth 1 beat, which means because a quarter note is worth 2 eighth notes, this is worth 2 beats. The half note, which is worth 2 quarter notes, is worth 4 beats, and the whole note is worth 8 beats. So in 6/8 time, because there are only 6 beats in each measure, you won't see a whole note. There are too many beats to exist in one measure of 6/8. So all that being said, we have a couple of different time signatures. There are some other time signatures, for example, 3/4 time. 3/4 time indicates that there are 3 beats in each measure, and the quarter note gets 1 beat. There's also 2/4 time. Again, 2 beats in each measure, quarter note gets 1 beat. Here's an interesting one. 3/8 time. The 3 indicates that there are 3 beats in each measure, but it's the eighth note that gets 1 beat. Now this is very similar to 6/8 time, the only difference being that there are half the number of beats in each measure. These are all things you're going to see in music, and so I want to give you just a little bit of an example or a couple examples of what this would look like when you're reading music. These are what we call rhythm cards, and each card has a rhythm in it. Here you can see the time signature, the notes. In this case, these are all quarter notes, and you'll see here, get my fingers in. See here and here, those are the bar lines which indicate the measures. In this case, there are 2 measures shown here. And you can see that there are 4 quarter notes in each measure. So these would be counted 1, 2, 3, 4. When you reach the bar line, you start counting over again. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. This bar line indicates the end of the measure. So you will always see a bar line at the end, even if it's the end of the piece. Now, on the back of this card, you will see there is a slightly different rhythm. We have some half notes here at the beginning and the end. This one would be counted, again, it's in 4/4, so there are 4 beats in each measure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. When we get to measures that have rests in them, we still have to count the rests. In this case, we count 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we count 1, 2, 3, 4 for this rest. Then we come down here, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4 for the whole note at the bottom at the end. Okay, so you'll notice that it's a little bit darker now. I actually got to editing this video and realized that when I began to talk about the Nocturne, Chopin's Nocturne, at the end of my original recording, the lights went wonky, some things happened, and so I decided to reshoot it. But because my day was really busy, it is now quarter to 11, so it's about 12 hours later than the last time I recorded. So I did want to talk about Chopin's Nocturne. This is one particular nocturne. We're going to talk about Chopin's Nocturne number 19. It's given the number 19 because that's the order in which it was published. Of his nocturnes, it was the 19th that was published. So it's Nocturne in E minor, number 19. It's also Opus 72, number 1. Opus is a word meaning work. Sometimes you may hear people describe their magnum opus. It's their great work. Chopin was a masterful pianist. He was brilliant, and he was a virtuoso. He was incredibly talented as a pianist. He had great renown while he was alive. A lot of people, he was very famous, and even more so after his death. I love playing Chopin. His music is very emotional. It has a lot of variation in it from piece to piece. And everyone is fun to play. This particular piece, Nocturne in E minor, has been used in quite a few different backgrounds. I know it was used on a Star Trek episode. I first heard it in a movie that was made in, I think, 1987. It was an adaptation of The Secret Garden, which is a children's book by Frances Hodgson Burnett. A few years after that, it was featured on the Hallmark Hall of Fame. And we had just gotten TV and a VCR. It was the first time we'd had one since I was very, very little. And we taped this particular movie off of the TV, along with all of the Hallmark commercials that went with it. And the movie, I love the book, and the movie was excellent. And this song just made it so much better. It really added to the mystery and the tragedy of the story. And so for me, this song really fed my melodramatic pre-adolescent heart. But because of that, because I really did enjoy that movie so much, and it was something that we watched as a family, this song really became very important to me. That's kind of all I've got for today. I hope you enjoyed this. I highly recommend going and listening to some Chopin. You can listen to the Nocturne if you click on the link below in the description. There's also a wide body of his works, both on YouTube, as well as you can easily find them in any place where you purchase music. He's very widespread. Lots of people like to play him. I encourage you to go out and find some of his works and really just enjoy them. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it was educational, and I hope it was fun and entertaining. If you did enjoy it, please like it down below. Subscribe if you would like to be notified when I post more videos. I will see you next week on Monday. If you choose to watch my Wednesday videos on Writing Wednesday, I will see you then. Have a great day.